The auction house was a place most people tried to forget. It smelled of old wood, dust, and sometimes something heavier like loss. It was here, on a chilly Saturday morning, that people gathered to bid on livestock, farm equipment, and sometimes animals no one else wanted. Today, it was the unwanted animals up for grabs, the ones that had no place, no home, no hope. Eva's small hand tightened around her father's sleeve. She was too young to understand the complex reasons why animals ended up here, but not too young to feel the sharp stab of pity every time she saw one caged, trembling, or scared. And today, the dog was worse than any she had ever seen. He was thin, far too thin. His fur hung in clumps, dirty and tangled, with patches missing as if someone had pulled at it roughly. His ears drooped and his tail tucked low, but it was his eyes that stopped Ava cold, big, round, and filled with a silent question. What had he done to deserve this? Why was he here? The auctioneer, an older man with a booming voice, tapped the microphone. Lot number 53, a mixed breed dog, approximately 3 years old. Needs a good home. Starting bid, $1. Ava glanced around. The crowd was sparse, mostly farmers looking to buy cattle or chickens. No one seemed interested in the dog. There was a brief pause, and then a gravelly voice from the back muttered, $1. That was it. The dog was sold. Ava's heart clenched. The man who paid barely glanced at him. He yanked the dog's chain roughly, and the dog flinched but did not resist. The man seemed more annoyed than kind. Ava's father gave her a brief, tight look but said nothing. They began to walk away. But Ava didn't want to leave. Daddy, why did no one want him? She asked, her voice trembling. Her father shrugged, looking anywhere but at the dog disappearing into the distance. Sometimes animals come to places like this because people can't take care of them anymore. It's not always pretty. Ava looked back once more. The dog's head hung low, his ribs showing beneath his filthy coat. She could almost hear his thoughts. How he wished for someone to love him, to keep him safe. That night, Ava lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She couldn't stop thinking about the dog. She imagined what his life must have been like. Cold nights alone, hunger gnawing at his belly, and the deafening silence after everyone left. The image was so vivid it hurt. She quietly crept out of bed and tiptoed to her parents' room, where her mother sat reading. Mom, Agle whispered, what happens to dogs like that one? Her mother sighed softly. Some get lucky and find new homes, but many don't. It's a hard world for animals like him. Ava's eyes filled with tears. I wish I could help him. Her mother stroked her hair. You have a big heart, sweetheart. Maybe one day you will. That night, Ava made a silent promise to herself. She didn't know how yet, but she would do something. She couldn't let that dog be forgotten. The morning sun spilled through the cracked curtains of Ava's bedroom, casting soft golden light over her face. But Ava wasn't asleep. She lay wide-eyed, her mind still tangled in the image of the dog from the auction, the one sold for just $1. At breakfast, she barely touched her food. Her father chatted about the week ahead, but Ava's thoughts drifted far away, back to that trembling dog. She felt a tug deep inside, a pull she couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. Later that day, Ava asked her father a question that surprised even herself. Can we find out who bought that dog? Her father frowned, rushing crumbs from the table. Why do you want to know? Because I want to help him. Her father sighed heavily, looking tired. Sweetheart, sometimes it's better to let things be. That man who bought the dog, he's none around here. He buys animals cheap and sells them fast. Or sometimes, he just leaves them to fend for themselves. Ava's stomach twisted. The idea of the dog being abandoned somewhere, left alone and scared, made her feel helpless. Determined, Ava spent the next afternoon asking around town. She talked to shopkeepers, farmers, even the auction house workers. Piece by piece, a story unfolded. The man who bought the dog was named Earl, a gruff, solitary man who ran a rundown property on the outskirts of town. Earl made a living by flipping animals, buying them cheap, hoping to sell them for more, or sometimes using them for parts if he couldn't sell. Many in town whispered about how he treated the animals poorly, but no one dared confront him. Ava's heart sank. How could someone be so cruel? That evening, she told her parents about Earl's place and begged if she could go see the dog. Her mother shook her head. It's dangerous, Ava. That man doesn't like visitors. But her father surprised her. Maybe I should go with you, he said, after a pause. That night, as the house fell silent, Ava lay awake plotting. If she could only find the dog, if she could show him kindness, maybe he could be saved. The following day, Ava and her best friend Mia set out with bikes, carrying a backpack filled with snacks, water, and a small blanket. They followed directions to Earl's property, a cluster of rundown sheds and cages surrounded by rusted fencing. From behind a thicket, they watched. Earl was harsh, shouting at animals confined in tiny cages. The air smelled heavy with dust and something sour. Ava's breath caught when she saw a familiar shape huddled near a fence, the dog from the auction. He was thinner now, ribs sharp beneath his fur, eyes dull but still watching. Ava's heart broke. Mia whispered, "We can't just leave him here." They watched as Earl tossed a bucket of water carelessly near the cage. The dog didn't even move to drink. Ava's fingers trembled. She knew what she had to do. That night, under the cover of darkness, Ava returned with Mia, carrying a pair of bolt cutters her father had lent her just in case. Her hands shook as she knelt beside the cage. The lock was old and rusted, easier to break than she expected. Click. The lock fell away. She reached inside, and the dog didn't flinch. Instead, he let her stroke his head gently. His fur was rough but warm under her hand. "On here, Shadow," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm going to get you out." Wrapping the dog in the small blanket, Eva lifted him carefully. Shadow was light, too light. As they slipped away on their bikes, the dog rested his head on Eva's shoulder. For the first time in a long time, his tail gave a tiny wag. But the hardest part was still ahead, hiding Shadow and protecting him from a world that didn't want him. The cool night air whispered through the trees as Eva pedaled cautiously, Shadow cradled carefully in the basket attached to her bike's handlebars. Every few minutes, the dog stirred, nudging his head against her jacket, and Ava whispered soft words of comfort. She'd never felt so responsible in her entire life. The ride back from Earl's property felt endless. The streets were empty, silent except for the soft hum of the bike tires on the pavement. Ava's heart pounded not just from the ride, but from the fear that they might be caught. What if Earl found out? What if he came to take Shadow back? She tried to push those thoughts away. When Ava finally reached her home, she slipped inside quietly, careful not to wake her parents. The house was dark, and the only sound was the slow breathing of her sleeping family. She tiptoed through the kitchen, grabbed a bowl, and filled it with water and some leftover chicken. In the shed behind the house, Shadow lay curled on a threadbare blanket Ava had found in the attic. His ribs still showed, and his eyes seemed wary, but he licked the water she offered. For hours, Ava sat beside him, brushing away the tangles and dirt from his fur. With every gentle stroke, she felt his trust grow. "I'm going to take care of you, Shadow," she whispered. "I promise." But the reality was harder than she had imagined. The next morning, Ava woke early, still worried about keeping Shadow hidden. The shed was old and creaky, and she knew if anyone came looking, the dog wouldn't stay a secret for long. At breakfast, she barely touched her food, her mind on the dog and what she needed to do. School felt like a distant place, a world away from the mission she had begun. When Ava's older brother Jake noticed her distraction, he asked, "What's going on, Ava? You're acting weird." I have a dog," she said, hesitating. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Where did you get a dog?" Mom and Dad didn't say anything. "I found him," Ava said softly. "He was at the auction, sold for $1. No one wanted him. I had to get him out." Jake's expression darkened. "You're going to get in trouble. Mom and Dad will freak if they find out." Ava bit her lip. "I can't just leave him, Jake. He needs me." Days passed, and Shadow slowly began to change. His eyes grew brighter, and he even barked once, a soft, hesitant sound that made Ava's heart leap. She fed him every meal she could spare, bathed him in the small tub in the shed, and talked to him about her day. Still, she knew it was only a matter of time before someone discovered her secret. One afternoon, Jake followed her after school. He watched from behind the bushes as Ava entered the shed. His footsteps were quiet, but not quiet enough. "Hey, Ava," Jake called, stepping into the open. Startled, Ava dropped the bowl she was carrying. Shadow barked, then retreated to a corner. Jake looked at the dog, then back at Ava. "Why didn't you tell Mom and Dad?" "I was scared," Ava admitted. "I didn't want him taken away." Jake sighed but didn't yell. Instead, he said, "We have to tell them. It's not safe to keep him hidden." Ava's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head. "No one else will love him like I do." For a moment, the two siblings sat in silence. Jake finally said, "Maybe there's a way we can help him together." Ava felt a glimmer of hope. That night, she and Jake talked quietly in their room. Jake promised to keep the secret, at least for now, but said they had to figure out how to make sure Shadow was safe for good. Ava knew it was the beginning of something much bigger than just saving a dog. It was about fighting for kindness, for second chances, for love where it seemed lost. And she was ready. The shed at the back of Ava's house had become a quiet sanctuary for Shadow. Each day, the dog's eyes grew brighter, his tail wagged a little more, and Ava's hope blossomed alongside him. But the secret weighed heavily on her chest. How long could she keep Shadow hidden? Ava had never been very good at keeping secrets. Her heart pounded every time someone came close to the shed, and her parents' occasional questions about why she was so tired or distracted were harder to dodge. But Shadow needed her. He was fragile and scared of the world, and she promised she'd protect him. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the yard, Ava was brushing Shadow's fur when she heard footsteps crunching through the grass. Her brother Jake appeared, a serious look on his face. "I can't keep this secret forever," Jake said quietly. "Mom and Dad are worried. They're talking about calling the shelter." Ava's breath caught. "No," she said firmly. "You can't let them take him." Jake looked torn but nodded. "We have to be careful." That night, Ava lay awake, thinking about Earl, the man who had sold Shadow for $1, and about how many other dogs were still trapped in places like his. The thought made her angry and determined. She wouldn't let Shadow go back there. Not ever. But hiding a dog was risky, and the walls felt like they were closing in. Then came the evening when the unthinkable almost happened. A loud knock at the front door jolted the house awake. Ava's parents answered to find two stern-faced animal control officers. "We've received complaints about an unlicensed dog," one said. Ava's mother tried to stay calm, but Ava's heart pounded as the officers asked if they could look around the property. The minutes dragged like hours. Her father went outside to speak with them, trying to explain they didn't have any dogs. The officers started walking toward the shed. Ava's stomach dropped. She grabbed a flashlight and slipped outside, heart racing. With trembling hands, she unlocked the shed door and called softly, "Shadow, come." Shadow emerged, hesitant but trusting, and Ava quickly wrapped him in her jacket. The officers paused but didn't see the dog hidden beneath the fabric. Breathless, Ava led Shadow back inside just as the officers finished their search and left. Inside, her parents looked worried but said nothing. Ava knew things were changing fast. The next day, Ava talked to her mother, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't want to lose him," she said. Her mother hugged her tightly. "I know, sweetheart. We'll figure this out." Word spread quickly around town about the little girl hiding a dog from the shelter. Some neighbors whispered, some frowned. The pressure mounted. Still, Ava kept Shadow safe, feeding him and nursing him back to health. Shadow's coat began to shine, his eyes brightened, and he learned to trust again. But Ava knew the secret wouldn't stay safe forever. She had to find another way, something bigger than herself. The world outside might not watch Shadow, but Ava's heart refused to let go. Days blended into nights as Ava and her family wrestled with the reality of Shadow's situation. The shelter was a looming threat, and the town's whispers were growing louder. Ava could feel the weight of it all pressing down on her, but her determination burned brighter than ever. She knew Shadow deserved more than to be hidden away in secrecy or returned to a place like Earl's. One afternoon, as Ava sat on the porch, deep in thought, her father joined her, holding a small flyer in his hand. It was colorful, printed with pictures of dogs and the words Local Animal Rescue. Volunteers needed. Maybe this is the answer, he said gently. There's a group nearby that helps dogs like Shadow. They find good homes, people who really care. Ava's eyes lit up. Can we take Shadow there? Will they help him? Her father nodded slowly. It won't be easy. They have rules, and the shelter might come looking. But if we can get Shadow in, he'll have a chance. That evening, Ava shared the idea with her mother and Jake. There was hesitation and worry, but everyone agreed that it was worth trying. Shadow deserved a new life. The next morning, Ava and Jake prepared Shadow for the journey. They gave him a warm bath, brushed his fur until it gleamed, and packed a small bag with his favorite blanket and treats. As they left the house, Ava looked back at the shed one last time, feeling a bittersweet tug. It had been their secret haven, but now it was time for a fresh start. At the rescue center, volunteers greeted them warmly. The air smelled of hope and second chances. Shadow sniffed around cautiously, but as Ava knelt beside him, whispering encouragement, his tail gave a small wag. The volunteers examined Shadow carefully, checking his health and noting his timid nature. One woman, Emily, knelt down and smiled at Ava. You did a wonderful thing bringing him here. Eva smiled shyly, but felt her heart swell with pride. Over the next few weeks, Shadow began to change. The shelter was busy but kind, and the volunteers showered him with patience and love. Eva visited every day after school, each time watching as Shadow grew stronger, more confident. But the journey wasn't without setbacks. Shadow had scars, both visible and hidden, that made trust difficult. Sometimes he would flinch at sudden movements or shy away from loud noises. Eva spent hours sitting quietly, letting him come to her on his own terms. Meanwhile, back in town, the auction house remained a harsh reminder of where Shadow's journey began. Eva heard that Earl was still buying and selling animals, and the thought made her shiver. She realized her mission was far from over. There were many dogs like Shadow, waiting for someone to care. One afternoon, Emily approached Ava with news. We have a family interested in adopting Shadow. They have a big yard and other dogs. It could be perfect. Ava's heart soared, but a flicker of fear crept in. What if they didn't love him like she did? What if Shadow was hurt again? The night before the meeting, Ava sat with Shadow in the quiet of the shelter. She stroked his fur and whispered, No matter what happens, I'll never forget you. The next day, the family came. They laughed and played with Shadow, who wagged his tail hesitantly but happily. Ava watched from a distance, tears streaming down her cheeks. She knew she had done everything she could. As Shadow walked out the shelter doors with his new family, Ava felt a mixture of sadness and hope. The dog who was once unwanted, sold for $1, was finally given a chance to be loved. And Ava knew that this was only the beginning of her journey, a journey to make the world a better place for every forgotten soul. The morning sun cast a gentle glow over the rescue center as Ava arrived with her usual hopeful smile. It had been a few weeks since Shadow left with his new family, and though she missed him fiercely, she felt proud every time she thought about his fresh start. Shadow was finally safe, loved, and free from the shadows of his past. But Ava's story and mission was far from over. As she stepped inside, Emily waved her over with a bright grin. Ava, we've got a visitor who wants to meet you. Curious, Eva followed Emily to a small office where a woman with kind eyes sat waiting. This is Mrs. Keller, Emily introduced. She's starting a local animal advocacy group and heard about what you did for Shadow. Mrs. Keller smiled warmly. Your story touched a lot of people. It inspired me. We need more voices like yours, especially young ones. Ava blinked, surprised. She had never imagined her small act could spark something bigger. Mrs. Keller continued, Would you like to help us? We're planning a community event to raise awareness about animal rescue and responsible pet ownership. you could tell your story. Ava's heart raced. The idea of standing in front of a crowd, sharing her journey, was scary but exciting. It was a chance to help more animals like Shadow. Over the next few weeks, Ava worked closely with Mrs. Keller and the rescue team. She helped design posters, write speeches, and even practice answering questions. With every step, her confidence grew. At school, Ava's friends were supportive, and some even joined the cause. They started a club dedicated to helping animals, collecting donations, and spreading the word. One afternoon, Ava received a call from the family who had adopted Shadow. They sent photos and videos of him playing in their big yard, happily chasing after a ball with other dogs. Shadow's tail wagged in every picture, and Ava's eyes welled with tears. The family promised to keep her updated, and Ava felt a deep warmth knowing Shadow was truly loved. As the day of the community event arrived, Ava stood nervously behind the microphone in the packed town hall. Parents, neighbors, local officials, and animal lovers filled the seats, eager to hear her speak. Taking a deep breath, Ava began, "This is the story of a dog named Shadow. He was once unwanted, sold for just $1 at an auction. No one wanted him, except me." She spoke of her journey, finding Shadow, rescuing him from Earl's place, hiding him in the shed, and finally bringing him to safety. She talked about the fear, the hope, and the love that changed everything. The crowd listened in silence, some eyes glistening with tears. When Ava finished, the room erupted into applause. Afterwards, people approached her, thanking her for sharing and asking how they could help. Donations poured in for the rescue center, volunteers signed up, and a few families expressed interest in adopting. Ava realized her small act of kindness had grown into a movement, a ripple spreading across the community. That night, as she lay in bed, Ava thought about Shadow and all the dogs still waiting for their chance. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready. Because sometimes all it takes is one person to make a difference. And sometimes that person is a little girl with a big heart. Ava's newfound role in the animal rescue movement brought her joy and a sense of purpose she'd never felt before. But with every bright moment came shadows from the past, reminders that the fight was far from over. One chilly evening, as Ava was closing up after a school club meeting, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Is this Ava?" a gruff voice asked. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "This is Earl," the voice said coldly. "I heard about the dog you took from me." Ava's heart froze. The man who had sold Shadow for $1, the man whose cruelty had haunted her, was calling. "I want that dog back," Earl growled, "and I'm watching you." The line went dead. Fear gripped Ava's chest. She looked around the empty room, suddenly feeling very alone. She told her parents immediately, who assured her they'd protect her, but the threat was real. In the days that followed, strange things began to happen. Tires screeched outside her house late at night. Shadow growled at shadows that seemed to lurk too close. The town's whispers turned into rumors. Some said Earl was planning to take back what was his, no matter the cost. Ava refused to back down. She was determined to protect Shadow and all the animals depending on her. With the help of Mrs. Keller and the rescue team, Ava contacted local authorities. They promised to keep a close watch on Earl and the property he owned. Ava's parents installed new locks and cameras, and Jake offered to stay home more often. Despite the fear, Ava continued her advocacy, speaking at schools and community events, rallying people to stand up for those who couldn't speak for themselves. One day, a volunteer found a stray dog near Earl's old property, thin, scared, and bearing the same signs of neglect Shadow had once shown. The dog was brought to the rescue center, where Ava met him for the first time. She named him Chance. Chance's arrival was a reminder of why Ava's mission mattered. There were still so many in need. At night, Ava would sit with Shadow and Chance, whispering promises of safety and love. The town began to rally around Ava's cause. More families opened their homes to rescue animals. The shelter expanded, and local officials passed new laws to protect abandoned pets. Ava realized her fight was not just against one man. It was against the system that allowed cruelty to thrive, and she was ready to keep fighting. Because love, she had learned, was stronger than fear. The months that followed were some of the hardest and most rewarding of Ava's life. The threats from Earl slowly faded as the community stood united and the police kept a watchful eye on the man's activities. Earl's harsh grip on the town's animal welfare loosened, thanks in part to the new laws inspired by Ava's efforts. Shadow thrived in his new home with a loving family, and Chance, once another forgotten dog, began to trust and heal under Ava's care and the rescue's watchful eyes. One sunny Saturday, the town gathered for the biggest event yet, the Grand Rescue Fair, a celebration of second chances and kindness. Stalls lined the town square, filled with pets looking for homes, volunteers sharing stories, and families coming together to support the cause. Ava stood on the stage, her heart swelling with pride. She looked out at the crowd, neighbors, friends, even some of the people who had once doubted her mission. They had all come to celebrate hope. "This is what we've built together," Ava said into the microphone, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "A community that cares, that refuses to turn away." Shadow was once unwanted, sold for just $1. But here he is, loved and safe. That's the power of kindness. As she spoke, a little girl in the crowd tugged her mother's hand and pointed excitedly. It was Shadow, sitting happily beside his adoptive family, tail wagging in pure joy. Tears shimmered in Ava's eyes. The fair was more than just a celebration, it was a promise. A promise that no animal would be forgotten, no voice left unheard. Ava's story had sparked something extraordinary. More rescue groups formed, more people volunteered, and awareness grew far beyond the town's borders. But for Ava, it was personal. That little dog, sold for $1, had changed her life, and she had changed his. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Eva sat quietly with Shadow and Chance by her side. The world felt full of possibility. She knew there would be new challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them. Because love had taught her that even the smallest actions could create ripples, ripples that might one day change the world. And it all started with a little girl who did the unthinkable.